So today we're going to read a story called Vish Conquers India. And we're going to read from the Swami Puranas. And it's interesting because throughout the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam, we've been talking about um, Vasista and also about um, Vish. Sorry, about Vishvamitra. So those are the two um, munis that we're often talking about, or rishis, and I find their names easy to confuse. So this is going to give us a little bit more background. So the title of the book or the chapter is Vish Bharath Conquers India. There was once a great king named Gade who had a tremendous dominion and was very righteous and a Dharma king. Gade was had a very noble son whose name was Vishvarath. When Vishvarath grew up to be a suitable age, the king Gade said, "Son, I have decided to retire to the forest to practice tapasya for the rest of my days. Please take over the responsibilities of maintaining and protecting this kingdom. I'm going to devote the rest of my life to spiritual discipline." Vishvarath answered, "Father, the first duty of a son is to fill the desires of his father, and in every way possible assist the father in attaining emancipation. Therefore, if it be your wish that I take over the kingdom, I have nothing further to say. But please discuss this matter with our gurus and your ministers. Present this matter before the people and let them determine whether or not they want me to be their king." Gay thought, "What a noble son I have." He called the gurus of the land, the Brahmins, and the representatives of the people of his kingdom and said, "I wish to devote myself to the path of self realization during my last years on earth. I have decided to retire to the forest and lead a life of asceticism, where I can practice meditation and contemplate a religious life free from the responsibilities of being a king. I have determined that my son, Vishvarath, shall become the king in my place." And all the people assembled, everyone shouted, "Vishvarath ki jai! What a noble king we have! What a great example we have! What a wonderful son we will have as a ruler." The people unanimously acknowledged Vishvarath as the king of their country. Gade retired to the forest with his queen and there began to practice tapasya. After some time, Vishvarath began to think, "A king of the warrior class is successful only in as far as he can expand the frontiers of his kingdom. It is not just sufficient that I have received the nation as an inheritance from my father who built it for me. Shall I pass the same thing on to my children? I must add to the inheritance that I have received from my ancestors. Only then can I pass on my legacy to my own sons." He called together all the learned and wise men of his kingdom and said, "I have decided to go to war and expand the borders of my kingdom." All the gurus and sannyas, the Brahmins and the sadhus unanimously said, "King, please don't do that. We are healthy, wealthy, and living at peace. We have abundance. Why will you go to war? If you take all the men from the fields to be soldiers in your army, who will harvest the crops?" Vishvarath didn't listen. He said, "My dharma as a Kshatriya king is to fight. I must fight and fulfill my dharma. What kind of fame and glory will I receive if I only take my father's inheritance and pass it down to my children? No one will remember that act. Only if I increase my family's wealth, valor, and fame will I be remembered. Take all the farmers and conscript them into the army. Be prepared to march off for war." By orders of the king, all the male citizens were conscripted into the army and trained for war. Vishvarath marched off in conquest. In a short time, he subjugated all the neighboring kingdoms and moved across the empire to conquer all of India. Victory after victory, he marched forward until no one knew the limits of his kingdom. Only after taking tributes from many kings and taking the crowns from many of the heads of many princes, he was satisfied, and then he turned around and headed towards home. The next story is called Vishista's Cow. He had been marching towards his home for several days. His troops had grown tired and hungry. When he came to the hermitage of Vasista Muni, Vasista was very pleased to hear that Vishvara, the king, had come to visit his ashram. He sent sannyasis and brahmacharis to meet the king and escort him to the hermitage with respect and honor. Vasista said, "My king, will you please be my guest for supper?" Vishvarath replied, "I have a tremendous army along with me. How is it possible that the king will feast while the soldiers go hungry?" Vasista said, "No, no, that is not possible. I invite you all. Please allow me the privilege of extending my hospitality to all." Vishvarath was happy to accept Vasista's invitation. Vasista went to his cow, Nandi. He said, "Nandi, we have visitors today. The king has come along with his entire army. Let's offer him the hospitality of Brahmins." Nandi opened her mouth, and out came sumptuous meals, pots full of food. Vasista squeezed her udder, and the milk poured into the buckets from which came curd and ghee, which produced many dishes and sweets. Many things were made from Nandi's milk. All of the soldiers of the tremendous army sat down to eat, and if a soldier wanted any particular dish to eat, the order was given to Nandi, and immediately that food came forth. They were the most sumptuous, luscious, Epicurean delights that anyone could possibly imagine. Vishvarath was amazed. "What wonderful meals you have prepared, Vashista. How could you feed so many people?" Vashista said, "It is my sacred cow, Nandi." "What an amazing cow you have, Vashista. I think that Nandi is the Kamandenu, the cow which gives satisfaction and fulfillment of all desires." Vasista agreed, "Yes, in fact, she is." Vishvarath was very pleased. He bowed down to the Guru, Vasista, and returned with his army to the kingdom. As he marched into the kingdom, he saw all the lands were barren. He looked at the long drawn expressions on his citizens' faces, and he saw that they had been living in abject poverty. He rode as a victorious king right through the main streets of the capital, yet no one had the energy to welcome him. When he arrived at the palace, his ministers came to greet him. "What happened to my kingdom?" asked Vishvara. "There is no one here to greet us or shout for the homecoming of their victorious king. What kind of subjects are these? What has happened here?" The ministers replied, "Your Highness, when you took all the men to fight in your wars, there was nobody here to harvest the crops. Who was here to tend the fields? Your subjects are starving. What will you do with all this gold that you brought? Can we eat it?" The king thought, "What should be done now? How can I feed all the citizens?" Then he remembered the sumptuous meals he had received at Vashista's ashram. At once he made his decision to return to the ashram and to bring the cow Nandi to his capital. Immediately he proceeded to Vasista's ashram and said, "Vasista, please give me your cow." Vasista said, "King, I can't give you my cow. That is Nandi. I make all my yagyas from her ghee. She is a member of my family. Vishvarath said, the sister, I'll give you 100 cows. Give me that cow. The sister said, King, I'm sorry. You keep your 100 cows. That is my Nandi. I can't give you my cow. Vishvarath said, all right, the sister, I'll give you 1,000 cows. Give me that cow. The sister said, O king, you can keep your 1,000 cows. That is my Nandi. I make all of my yagyas from the ghee prepared from her milk. I'm not going to give you this cow. Vishvarath said, I need that cow. And if you don't give me that cow right now, I'm going to take the cow by force. The sister said, you can try to take the cow by force if you like to try to steal from a Brahmin. But king, I'm not going to give you the cow. Vishvarath said, Captain of the guards, put a rope around that cow's neck and bring her to my capital. The captain of the guard called his soldiers. Soldiers, put a rope around that cow's neck and take her to the capital. The soldiers went as ordered and put a rope around Nandi's neck and began to pull on it. The cow said, Vasista, did you give me to that king? And Vasista replied, no. Then why are these soldiers putting a rope around my neck and trying to drag me away? Nandi, I never told them that they could do that. I never agreed to let you go, not by force and not by price. You didn't? No. Suddenly Nandi bellowed, ah! And from her mouth came forth legions of soldiers, heavily armed, and they started to run to attack the king's army. The king's army began to fight, but all his soldiers were defeated. The entire army was lost. Then Nandi's soldiers went after Vishvarath. He ran. The soldiers ran after him with their weapons ready to strike. He ran all across the continent with the soldiers running right behind. He ran and ran in flight, but the soldiers kept running behind. He ran in a circle and came back to the ashram of Vasista, where he fell at Vasista's feet and cried, Save me! I take refuge in you. Please spare my life. I realize that the power of Kshatriya kings and warriors is nothing in comparison to the power of a Brahmin. If you are gracious to me and spare my life, I will go to the forest to practice tapasya. I too shall become a Brahma rishi. The sister said, Okay, I spare you. Go perform your tapasya and see what you realize within yourself. Vishvara bowed to the Brahmin, the sister. He shed his armor and his weapons and put on the dress of a hermit and went into the forest to begin the practice of austerities. Next chapter. Vishvarath becomes Vishvamitra. So Vishvarath began his tapasya. He sat absorbed in deep meditation for long periods of time. When he sat in the deepest meditation, he sent out such a strong vibration that 3 goddesses came, Mahakali, Mahalakshmi, and Mahasaraswati. Each put forth their essence, the essence of the wisdom which they embody. Those essences of wisdom united and manifested as Gaia, which means wisdom, and Tree, which means 3, Gayatri, the embodiment of the 3 forms of wisdom: creation, preservation, and transformation, or Satya Guna, Tamas Guna, and Rajas Guna. This essence of wisdom became a goddess known as Gayatri. She came to Vishvarath in his meditation and blessed him, and she revealed to him the mantra of Gayatri. Om Bhur Bhuvasva Tat Savitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dio Yo Naha prachodayat. Om, the infinite beyond conception. Bhur, the gross body of sensory perception. Bhuva, the subtle body of internal mental conception. And Swa, the causal body of intuitive recognition. Tat means that. Savitur is the light of wisdom. Varenyam is the highest. And Bargo is wealth. Devasya, of the gods. Dhimahi, we meditate upon. Dio yo naha, give to us. Prachodayat, increase, literally, rise up. And we'll go over that one more time. She revealed to him the mantra of Gayatri. Om Bhur Bhuvasva Tat Savitur Varenyam Bargo Devasya Dhimahi Dio yo naha prachodayat. Om, the infinite beyond conception. Bhur, the gross body of sensory perception. Bhuva, the subtle body of internal mental conception. Swa, the causal body of intuitive recognition. Tat, that. Savitur is the light of wisdom. Varenyam is the highest. Bargo is wealth. Devasya, of the gods. Dhimahi, we meditate upon. Dio yona, give to us. Prachodayat, increase, literally, rising up. So that's the Gayatri Mantra and his translation of it. So Vishvarath began to meditate upon this mantra and to recite the mantra again and again. Gayatri came to Vishvarath in his meditation and said, Vishvarath, the chariot of the universe, I give you a new name according to your new character. Because you have brought this new realization to mankind, you have acted as a friend. Therefore, I give you the name Vishvamitra, which means friend of the universe. So Vishvara became Vishvamitra. He continued his tapasya and his meditation and became a Raja Rishi, a seer amongst the kings. Through more purification, he became a Deva Rishi, a seer amongst the gods. He continued to perform this tapasya for many, many years until his strength and willpower were of unswerving conditions. He could not be moved. He was completely absorbed in the sadhana and tapasya, and still he continued to meditate. So that's the end of this. Interesting. I never heard any of this before. Vishwamitra was actually king first, who obviously made some poor decisions, and then went to and meditated. Are there any questions about this?
So what happens with the king's son that went to do tapasya?
That's him.
That was him. Okay.
Yeah. So the king went to do tapasya first, which was Gade.
Right.
Ghade, however you say that. They don't really say. One assumes that he must have ascended into heaven being such a good king. But it was the king's son who was Vishvarath or whatever his name was. And then he made some bad decisions to conquer the world. It's interesting because we've talked about Madhu and Kataiba, the two demons that came when Vishnu was on the I think the lotus leaf in the middle of the ocean, and then Brahma came from his navel. And meanwhile, Vishnu was absorbed in yoga nidra and deep meditation and or sleep. And these two demons arrived, Kataiba and um, Tabu and Kataiba, I think the name was. But anyways, and so then that story is that um, they wanted to kill Brahma. Said, Brahma, come down and fight with us. And Brahma said, wait, I'm an old man. I have to wake up Vishnu. And so he couldn't wake up Vishnu. So he started praying to the mother, Nidra, the mother, understanding that he was totally absorbed in her. And so she appeared to him and she took Vishnu out of this yoga nidra, this deep absorption. So that, and then he said, okay, I'll fight you. And for 5,000 years or something, he had to fight two warriors. But, and he is successful after a while, but first they take a little break. He says, wait a second, I need to take a little break. It's been 5,000 years and there's two of you. So, one by one, you take breaks, but I've been going nonstop. And so during that time, he says, he calls the Divine Mother, says, wait a second, what's going on? And she says, oh, I gave him a boon that, that they couldn't be killed by anybody or something like that. They couldn't be killed on uh, in any wet place, I think it was. And of course, they're surrounded by ocean. And so then she says, okay, well, I'll help you. I'll sort of bewitch them or tempt them with ego. And so she does. And they become real haughty. Like, well, you know, I think Vishnu starts by saying, oh, you two are doing so well. I should grant you a boon. And they were being very haughty and said, wait a second, we're beating you, and we're much stronger than you. We should give you a boon. And Vishnu didn't skip a beat. He said, okay. Um, that I can, exactly, that I can cut off your heads. And then they said, okay, but wait a second, you did promise us a boon. So our boon is that we can only be killed where it's dry and sea ocean around. They thought they'd be safe, but Vishnu made his thigh very huge, and and then they made themselves very huge, but he made his thigh huger, and finally they just laid their heads down and chopped it off. But the reason I'm telling you this is that Swami Saraswati Satchidananda, Swami Satchidananda Saraswati, the one who's writing this, he calls them too much and too little. And this is a really good example of where somebody had, he had a beautiful kingdom. It says in there that his people were at peace and happy and fulfilled and doing good, good things. But he all of a sudden had this, temptation of too little. It's like, oh no, even though everything's so good, if I don't go out and conquer more, and of course his ego sounds like it was very much in play there too. How will they pass down my name as some great warrior if I've just sat here and ruled the kingdom in peace and harmony? It's like, so this is a really good example of too much and too little that caused his ruination. Well, caused the ruination of his kingdom at that point. Eventually, it led him to something better, which was to do tapasya and become a great Deva Rishi, the Rishi of the Devas, and change his name to the friend of the universe, Vishvamitra. So that's my little wisdom for the day. It's interesting as we read these stories and we see the intertwining of them. But like I said, I thought I had read about when Gayatri came, but that's the first time I've read that he was giving off so much light that Mother Goddess Durga, Lakshmi, and Saraswati all arrived. And so the three of them together became Gayatri, because Gaia means what does Gaia mean? All wisdom or something, and tree means three. So the three of all wisdom have gathered together for Gayatri. And then her mantra.
Which is beautiful.
Yeah, exactly.